Well, good morning, everybody. It is July 2nd. Of course, it's Thursday. And since it's Thursday, that means we have the drive-through communion tonight from 5 to 5:30. So please, if you're in Lake City, avail yourself of that opportunity to partake of communion. Or if you've got a relative that hasn't been able to get to church, even if they're not a Woodlawn member, and you think they might like to have communion, please stop by and grab a baggie for them, because we put the communion in little baggies. There's a little prayer in there that you can say to yourself or with yourself, and receive and embrace the body and the blood of Christ. So please avail yourself of that. Or like I said, even if you're not a member of Woodlawn and you're local, or even if you're out of town, for crying out loud, if you're out of town and you'd like to have communion, give us a call. I'll get Clint to send one out to you. We can mail them. Hey, why not? Sure. So with that, we will have tonight at 7, we will have a live stream. We're changing things up. I think I mentioned last week we're going to change from having an actual service. I've got something different planned. But I'll be on briefly at 7, and then I'll probably have a link to either a hymn or a sermon, perhaps one of my old sermons, or perhaps a sermon by someone else that I really enjoy and I think is really edifying. So watch for that. We'll start that tonight, and we'll try that for a while and see how that works. Just shaking things up a bit, because we can't always be in the same rut. We got to try new approaches every once in a while. So with that, we are still in 1 Peter for just a little while longer. We're getting close to the end. We're in the 5th chapter today, and we're going to take the first 4 verses, so verses 1 through 4 today. So that's what we're looking at in 1 Peter chapter 5. And this one's a little different. We were somewhat changing directions anyway. We've been talking a lot about suffering and suffering in Christ and all of that. So let's take a look at the first 4 verses of chapter 5 in 1 Peter. Okay. Now as an elder myself and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as one who shares in the glory to be revealed, I exhort the elders among you to tend the flock of God that is in your charge, exercising the oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you do it, not for sordid gain, but eagerly. Do not lord it over those in your charge, but be examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will win the crown of glory that never fades away. Okay. Here, Peter, or the author at least, if we believe it's Peter, has identified himself as someone that has witnessed the sufferings of Christ. So that would give it some credence towards being Peter, that he's an actual witness of Christ. And of course, if we know that it's Peter, then we remember that whole thing about the 3 denials and the rest, the reimposition or reinstallation of Peter on the shores of Lake Galilee. And so we look at Peter not as a perfect man by any means, do we? But as a restored man, and as God using someone imperfect to do his perfect will. And that's important. We need to remember that in our today's culture, where we are getting wrapped up in thinking that that everybody in the past had to somehow meet our definition of perfection. And guess what? Nobody does that. But rather, we need to look at these people as being inspirations, because imperfect people doing great things. And that's much, much more biblical, folks. So if you're taking an attitude towards that everyone must and somehow meet your definition of perfect, nobody does it. Not even you. So, at any rate, he is an elder and a witness to the suffering of Christ, as well as one who shares in the glory to be revealed. He himself has identified himself as one that's going to share in the glory of Christ returning. He exhorts the elders among you. He's talking to the leaders of the church. He's talking to the pastor. He's also talking to those that are the leaders of the church. That would be, in our structure, the elders. That would be the people on the church and the Christian council. And of course, in our tradition, we believe that once an elder, always an elder. And so once you are considered a leader of the church, you are always looked to as a leader of the church. And therefore, you've taken on a certain responsibility to live accordingly. Let's put it that way. Because he goes on here, to tend the flock of God that is in your charge. Each little church that we've got a group of people that we're here and they're placed under our care, and we're to be there to love them and to guide them and to support them. And if you're needing some loving and some guiding and supporting, by all means, call me or call one of the elders or one of the leaders, because it's not only I that ministers to the flock. It's a job for the whole leadership, for all the members, really, of the church. We lean on each other, okay? There may even be a case where you have something that you're not comfortable talking to the pastor about, but you're more comfortable talking to someone else inside the church. And by all means, if that's more comfortable, go right ahead. But trust me, I've kind of had a life in which I've heard kind of pretty much everything. So don't feel I'm going to judge you, because I'm not going to do that. That's not my job. Exercising the oversight, not under compulsion. You're not supposed to feel compelled. Though when you have a calling, you feel like you have no choice in many ways, and you can resist that calling. But it is supposed to be done willingly and joyfully. Okay, even though being a minister is not an easy job. It's not a job that is without stress. In fact, one of the interesting things is, I wished I'd have seen this before I decided to become a pastor. Forbes magazine did a study, and out of the 9, I'm not sure why they picked 9, out of the 9 most stressful jobs, being a pastor ranked number 5. I'm in the top 5. So, hey, winning. So leading and being a Christian, not just being a pastor, but being a Christian isn't necessarily a stressless thing, because you do have to confront things, and you do have to deal with things, and you do mourn over things, and you see things going on in the news, and you mourn for that, and you are heartbroken for that. And why are you heartbroken? Well, because God's heartbroken, folks. So it's not unnatural for you to feel that same way. As God would have you do it, to be an overseer, to be a leader, not for sordid gain, but eagerly. Not supposed to, ministers are not in it for the income; they're in it for the outcome. Okay, being a pastor is not necessarily the most financially gratifying position in the world. That's an understatement of the day. But it's not about that. It's more about looking and seeing those little children and watching them grow up. And seeing someone whose life is a mess slowly get themselves back together and to go on to have children, perhaps, and the grandchildren, and become something. So there's something much different about it than the norm of trying to make it an income. If you're in it for the fame and the income and all of that, well, then I kind of have to question: are you really in it for the right reasons? And it's not supposed to be, ministry is not supposed to be big and flashy, in my opinion. It's supposed to be down and dirty and in the trenches. So I have a little different idea of ministry than some, perhaps. But I think a lot of ministers share that idea. Do not lord it over those in your charge. Do not do that. Ministers know better than anyone else. If you think that the minister is perfect, most ministers are not perfect. Present company accepted, of course. Just don't mention that to Gail, because she might not believe you. But at any rate, no, ministers are not perfect. I'm certainly far from perfect. So you don't lord that over them. But be examples to the flock. Be examples in many ways, just like I talked before. These people that are imperfect but are struggling and fighting and straining towards trying to be better, such as one of the great men in history would be Abraham Lincoln. Was he a perfect man in all of his life? No, but he was straining and working towards being better, and he was working trying to do better things for everyone. And he really was moved to try to free the slaves, and that was the reason he became in politics. So he was an imperfect man. All of us are imperfect people. But we would give ourselves over to God, to let God to use us. And that's the example that you're supposed to live. Not only the pastor, but all of the flock, especially the elders and the leaders of the church. When remember what James said, when you're going to teach, you're going to be a leader, you're going to be judged a little more harshly. So guess what? You take on those leadership roles, you take on a responsibility not only to be do good on Sunday and to appear righteous on Sunday, but to live your life that way as an example. So careful what you post on Facebook. You know, the dirty jokes, things like that. You know, all of those things. That's not really witnessing the way you want. Let's put it that way. The sordid things that you might put on Facebook, you might think are funny. Humans have a rather crass sense of humor. We all realize that. But are you really modeling Christ when you do that? And other things. I mean, that's just think about it. I'm not going to get into details. Let's put it that way. But think about it. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will win the crown of glory that never fades away. The chief shepherd, of course, is Christ. You know, any other, you know, the pastor and the elders and those were sub-shepherds, if you want to put it that way. You know, sub-shepherd, you know, different layers, perhaps, if we want to look at it that way. But we all answer to only one shepherd, and that's the chief shepherd, Jesus. And so we need to always remember that, and we always need to be adherent to that responsibility that we have to him and to his flock. And you know, it's difficult, it's not complicated. Just love one another. We say that all the time. So we're going to end there. You know, the one thing that does trouble me a little bit, win the crown of glory that never fades away. Don't think of that as you're going to get a crown on your head and you're going to be crowned in some way elevated. I don't believe in a hierarchy in heaven. So, other than God, you know, you got God, everyone else. Okay, there's your hierarchy. The Godhead, 3 in 1, the triune God, everybody else. So, with that, have a wonderful day. Live a life of example for people. Set a good example. Don't be that one that sets the bad example. You know, there's always that joke that say, you know, everybody has to be an example. I'm going to be a bad example. Well, that's not necessary. That's not the way to go. Okay, be a good example. Live your life for Christ. Be a blessing to someone today. Hope to see you through the drive-through communion if you're here in Lake City tonight at 5:30, and then tune in at 7. See what I come up with. Okay. Have a blessed one. Bye-bye.